Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing David Kakishiba, Executive Director of the East Bay Asian Youth Center in Oakland, California. David, it's great to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing the work that you do.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Well, and you serve 2,500 youth annually across Oakland and Sacramento, those regions. So what's really fascinating to me is that you were founded almost 50 years ago.
Yes.
Or 50 years ago. And the impetus of your founding is so very important to inform how you function today. Talk about the impetus of your founding.
Well, I was not there when it was created in 1976. But from what I understand is that the organization kind of is sort of an outgrowth of a lot of involvement, activism among Asian American educators in the city of Berkeley, in Berkeley Unified School District, that were seeking to establish ethnic studies, Asian American studies. That was sort of like in the early 70s. There was a lot of stuff around the creation of bilingual education as a pedagogy, and a lot of that came from Berkeley and Berkeley Unified. And from the standpoint of young people at that time, basically Japanese, Chinese, Filipino American young people who were my age, but also came from very similar backgrounds, where we were first in our families to be born and raised here in the United States, and our parents are immigrants. And from what I understand, that people were looking for a safe place where Asian American youth can congregate, build mutual support about the kinds of issues and experiences that they were going through during that time period. And because there was nowhere else for them to really go in the Berkeley schools and the recreation centers and some of the other public spaces where they did not see anybody like them, and nor did the people that were the professionals working in those areas look like them and share that background. So it was sort of like kind of a self-help kind of deal. And that was really it. It was about creating a supportive space that was kind of culturally kind of focused.
One of the things that I find so fascinating is that if you take a look at how government responds, and government is there theoretically to help all citizens, government is very often behind the eight ball. In other words, they're delayed in terms of their response. And by the time they respond, they are not meeting the rapidly changing needs, particularly of youth. So the thing that really is interesting is that all of our families, no matter what ethnic group we come from, we have a different version of this same story. So let's bring us up to date of how the organization, the East Bay Asian Youth Center, functions today, because now you're serving a whole bunch of different people, including your traditional constituents, but you broadened your services considerably over the years.
Yeah, that's right. I think we've gone through a couple of phases of kind of adaptation, change, and expansion. I do want to say, as I mentioned, when I first got there in 1980, as I said, the organization was created by people like me who were American-born, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino. By the time I got there in 1980, the Asian community was dramatically changing with migration from Southeast Asia, in particular, in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. So the numbers of newcomers, the diversity of nationality, language, culture, was tremendous. So we were responding to that need in terms of both and I think that the kind of the language we use today in terms of like trauma-informed care kind of didn't exist back then. And so there were language needs, acculturation needs, and ultimately kind of mental health, violence prevention types of issues as well. And that is what brought us. We were founded in Berkeley, but it brought us to Oakland, because the sheer volume and concentration of people and challenges, life challenges people were facing in Richmond, San Pablo area, but most definitely in Oakland, and you would see that all around in big urban centers in California and actually throughout the United States. We got to Oakland and we were working almost exclusively with Southeast Asian, Cambodian, Laotian, Mien, Vietnamese and Chinese Vietnamese refugee young people, and kind of deeply in the work of violence prevention and working with young people caught in the juvenile and criminal justice system.
And let's also talk about the fact that that is not just a negative, like preventing violence, right? It's also opening doors, opening windows, showing a path of elders who have been here before, who can gain certain respect for their own life experience into a future of opportunity where.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, the approach to violence prevention is through a positive youth development framework. It was being able to first and foremost, build a trusting and supportive relationship with young people. And from there, being able then to create and capitalize on different kind of learning and earning opportunities for young people to enable them to grow their knowledge, skills, and aspirations. Our work for many years in Oakland tended to be partly in Chinatown but primarily in the kind of greater San Antonio neighborhood district here in Oakland, where the vast majority of Southeast Asian families were residing. We had found that after many years that our ability to kind of best serve Southeast Asian youth in our neighborhoods was that we actually had to work with everybody. And what I mean by that is that Southeast Asian young people were going to schools in our neighborhood schools. They were either going and playing or going and doing crazy stuff in our neighborhood parks. And so we learned that we have to help kind of transform our public institutions that are serving young people. And that meant kind of both working with the system, but working with all young people in the schools and in our neighborhood.
So over time, what you end up doing, and this is, again, I find this to be fascinating because in earlier phases of the United States, and it still is true to a certain extent today, everything was defined by race and skin color and what group you belong, what subgroup you belong, whether you were Filipino or Chinese or Japanese or whatever. But as we all mature, as society is maturing, it's much more intersectional now. And so you're serving in the interest of your traditional communities, but now it's in the interest of the broader community because in that intersectionality where you have youth of different backgrounds interacting, where you have youth of different backgrounds going to the same school, where they're using the same parks,
right?
It becomes a much more complex, but also a series of services with greater opportunity, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, in the main, that kind of an approach, and if you're effective in that approach, you're going to catalyze positive impacts for everyone, and I think that's a major plus.
And then intermarriage also is much more prevalent. Now it's just people, being married and families are no longer growing along traditional lines. We're redefining our traditions.
Yeah.
And so again, you're dealing with a modern society, a modern family, a modern way of being in the schools and other places. So how does that affect how you cultivate the organization so you can keep up with the times and you don't end up becoming kind of the old organization that was what might have been relevant in the 80s or the 90s, but we're heading into 2030. How do you shift that sensibility?
We try to be mindful and we try to practice. And our organization kind of fell into this for a period of time But you could be, as a nonprofit organization, and particularly you get to a certain size, your direction can be dominated by money. And funding sources needing a particular service, and it's a very narrow kind of.
And then you become an extension of government with the built-in inflexibilities that government has. So how do you deal with that? Do you have to say no?
So
do you have to be insistent? Do you have to become more of an advocate?
Right. And that means that you have to be in communications. You have to be in partnership with the community that you're serving. And in our case, that meant both young people and family members, parents and grandparents, and what's going on in the neighborhood as a whole, what's going on in our particular schools, and what do people want? What do people feel needs to happen? And so we have to be, it's a cliche to be mission driven to use that term, but it's real. And you have to, for us, it's a constant struggle to not get comfortable, not just go with the routine, but do the hard work of really being in kind of an equitable relationship with the people we're serving, and to be led by that. And that meant also not just listening processes, but having people who are from the neighborhood that are both in the leadership at the staff level and also in the leadership at the governing board level. And so as a result, yes, we have said no to things. We have, for example, in the sort of after school expanded learning arena here, which is a really big deal in California. I mean, we've exited probably about a dozen schools because we're spread out all over, and we're really more of a place-based organization. And so being in deep East Oakland or in West Oakland and other places like that is, while it's a need, there are other service providers that would do the work. We have to retain our loyalty and our commitment.
Well, what you're doing is you're doing what any business, your business is social good.
Yeah.
Right? You want to have the most impact that you are uniquely positioned to provide within those communities. If there's somebody else who can provide it, you're going to make way for them to provide it so that you can use your scarce resources to have the highest impact where you're best positioned. I mean, that's sophisticated business thinking right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? It's basically knowing your market, knowing where you can do the most good, and adjusting, and also being very analytical about it. Right? I'd love to do everything. Right? We already have an investment, but maybe that investment wasn't as well considered as we should have. Let's take a different tact, and let's shift that investment over here and those resources over here. Can you talk a little bit about sort of those different revenue streams and how you ensure that what you're doing is having the impact that the community needs, as opposed to just sort of throw money at a problem and see what happens?
I think we've been very fortunate, and I have to say we actually work towards positioning the organization to access different public funding streams that are directly tied to what our core strategy is in a given school or a given neighborhood. Part of that is actually taking on a much bigger long-term policy advocacy, community organizing role to create those funding streams. And so in Sacramento, we are part of a big citywide effort that was in years in the making to build a local funding stream for children and youth services in the city of Sacramento, where nothing really existed. We had done that 30 years ago in Oakland at the height of gun violence, crack cocaine in Oakland, and we created something called the Kids First Initiative, something that we learned from San Francisco and Margaret Brodkin and folks doing the work out there who had done it like 3 years prior, by doing something that over time was transformative. Oakland is a tough town, but in terms of youth development, in terms of creating resources, public resources for young people, Oakland and the people of Oakland has probably been the most generous city anywhere in California to be able to tax themselves or to create city budget set-asides for it. We believe that that's kind of part of our role, not our primary role, but a kind of a strategic kind of work stream for us. And so we've done that. It's really more about where it's been more problematic is, as I said, like in the expanded learning after school world in Oakland and in California. 30 years ago it was brand new. And over time, it's become institutionalized, highly regulated. The flexibility of being able to use
a little bit inflexible, right?
Yeah, is pretty much gone. You just have to be a little bit of a maverick about that to figure that out.
Give me an example of what you want but can't do yet.
So in California, there's been in Oakland in particular, there's been a big kind of fanfare about what they would call community schools. And community schools is an approach where you're just not teaching math and English in the classroom, but you're serving the whole child, so the young person is ready to learn and to build strong personal and social relationships. And expanded learning, after out of school time learning, is a core element of kind of a community school approach. But the money is heavily weighted in after school, and over the course of the years, it's gotten, again, I mentioned, institutionalized and very restricted to that time period, and about doing your typical after school type of programming, where I believe that money would be best. I mean, it's got to be done in accordance with a real plan and strategy, with some outcome metrics to achieve. But it should be serving how after school money could support a full-on family resource center at Oakland High School. We founded and we manage. We're the lead agency for the Oakland High Wellness Center. It's like the most utilized wellness health center in Alameda County, and it's largely because it's been much more of a kind of a youth development kind of approach to health and wellness and education. And
so what you're saying is that instead of having the traditional after-school programs, which are kind of formulaic, it's a template.
Categorical, yeah.
Instead, let's think about what families need. You created this health and wellness center, and what you find is that utilization is high. So now you have evidence of need and of a need met. Are you taking that out now as a roadshow in order to create replicated models that could work in other communities, or to advocate for increased funding for this model?
Yeah, kind of both. On the former, use in terms of the high school wellness center, we are kind of promoting that, advocating for that in Sacramento, both in our base school in Sacramento's Luther Burbank High. And there's real buy-in by faculty and administration and students there. The issue is really funding, stable funding to be able to launch and sustain a well-operating wellness center. But the model of Oakland High, as well as the model of providing core funding through Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency, where they've taken their tobacco settlement award monies to kind of seed wellness and health centers all around Alameda County. It's something like Sacramento County and many other counties don't do. They don't have that. And therefore, in my opinion, the commitment to getting behavioral health services to young people is really weak, to be frank. And you have to work with schools if you're trying to get to young people. And so, I think that the Oakland High model, it does resonate, but it's one thing for people to look at it, feel it, talk to people, and say, "Wow, that's great. We need to do it here." And then the next level is like, "Okay, how are you going to move millions of dollars to do this? Not at one school, but to look at first maybe piloting 3 to 5 schools, and then take it on countywide." That is a much heavier lift that takes a long time, and we're working on it. But by the time it gets realized, I probably won't be around.
So what's next for the organization beyond this collaboration through Sacramento? Do you have any particular programs that will hit in the next 6 to 12 months that you'd like to draw attention to?
Our core programming is going to continuously improve. We're always focused on that. But in terms of kind of new or more kind of breakthrough initiatives, we are involved in 2 things. One is that both more on a neighborhood life level. In our neighborhood here in Oakland, street level open air sex trafficking is we're ground zero for Oakland for that. And there are a lot of underage girls that are being swept up into that, and it just affects everyday normal neighborhood life. And so we've been facilitating a neighborhood coalition that is fighting on multiple fronts about trying to get the city and county to work on a kind of a multi-pronged strategy to address the presence of this business activity in our neighborhood in particular and in general in Oakland. And the other big thing is going back to about creating new funding streams. And what we're just now pulling together another citywide coalition, largely of youth development organizations. There's a lot of interest and concern about the lack of resources for older youth, essentially high school and transitional age young people, and in particular resources for providing paid work experience, transitional employment. And so we're looking to try to create a $15, $20 million funding stream for that work. And we're looking to maybe going to the voters of Oakland 2 years from now for a ballot initiative.
This is very, I'd just like to thank you for sharing all that you've shared. Right? All this sophistication, all the work of your people, all the history, all the communities thinking, all the volunteers, all the people who are served and serve. I want to thank you for sharing that with us, because what you've unpacked today is incredibly sophisticated. David Kakishiba, Executive Director of the East Bay Asian Youth Center in Oakland, California. Please thank everyone who I mentioned, everyone who you mentioned. We really admire your work, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the time.